Hello everyone! Today we will be discussing and reviewing the second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, Deadhouse Gates. Oh my god, this book shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. It's one of these books that I feel are really close to my heart. Like, it's one of these best friends that you can always go to when you have a problem. It feels so authentic, so real, that it has become one of my favorite books I have ever read in my life. In this book, we are dropped into a completely new continent, the continent of 7 cities, and I loved this setting. The cities in this book, like Hisar or Aran or Erlitan, were so enjoyable. And I feel like Erison is really brave in dumping us into this completely new world in the second book of the series. It just adds so much expansion and world building and cultural heritage to this series. And the whole continent, I mean, it feels so arid, and so, you know, we have all of these Odan deserts, and there's insects and dangerous creatures, and it just feels very different to anything that we saw in Gardens of the Moon in Genebakis. And I really appreciate the contrast between the two settings. I know a lot of people might get a bit lost, because obviously by the second book in a series, when you start to get attached to many of the characters you've seen before, and you're dropped into a completely new place, it can be a bit overwhelming, but I really enjoyed it. Because, like, this continent, to me, it feels rich with history. It feels like it has a deep and profound backstory to it. We see some information about the formation of the First Empire, for example. And I'm a really big fan of this setting. The whole idea of the uprising and the revolution was, I think, a very cool theme in the book. The themes of oppression, of freedom, of cultural identity, I think play a very crucial a very crucial role in this book. And I'm already telling you, my favorite storyline from this book has to be the Chain of Dogs. The Chain of Dogs. I mean, I think it was told in such a real and gripping way, and it actually reminded me of something that happened to me around 2 years ago, when I decided to go traveling solo around Southeast Asia, and the first country that I visited was Myanmar during the summer, and I was exploring the temples, the magnificent culture. It's one of the best countries I had ever visited in my life. There was almost no tourists, and it was just really nice. But when I was traveling around some villages that were bordering with Bangladesh, I saw firsthand the mass migration of the Rohingyas, which is an ethnic group from Myanmar, and they were being prosecuted and murdered because of their religion and their ethnic background. And the whole country basically was trying to kill them all, and that's why they were fleeing to Bangladesh, where they were settling down in some refugees camps that were in a very bad condition. So even though I wasn't part of this migration, I only saw it from a distance, but when reading The Chain of Dogs, everything felt so incredibly real and true to real life, tragically. And when people say Malazan is brutal and grotesque and even grimdark and horrific, well, our real world, in many ways, is 1,000 times worse than anything you will ever read in Malazan. Even though we, most of the times, don't get to see it from our comfortable homes. So if you haven't heard about the Rohingyas story, I suggest you look at it, because it's something that left me really heartbroken, and I think it's something that should be touched more upon in media, for example. And in Deadhouse Gates, we get to travel with almost a completely new cast of characters, except for only a few of them. And for example, starting with maybe the storyline of the Path of Hands, we get to travel with some of the characters we had already met in Guards on the Moon. For example, Callum McCarr, who is trying to avenge everything that had happened to the bridge burners in the previous book, and he's trying to kill the Empress, and therefore travels a large part of the story with Fiddler and the others. And to me, in this book, it felt like these characters were more fleshed out than in Guards of the Moon. I could finally see more into their characters, and I personally felt much more connected to them, especially with Callum, who I now adore so much. And what I really love is that after everything that we go with him in this book, going through the full Varaku desert, going through Tremolor, with the boat with all of the sorcerers. He also confronts many assassins when arriving to Malaz City. And we finally, at the end, expect this final epic scene between him and Lasine. And then, bam, 1.5 pages of conversation between him and the Empress, whereby the Empress is not even physically there. And it felt so anticlimactic, but in a good way. Because this is what I really love about Erikson, and it's that he subverts our expectations completely all the time. It doesn't matter what you think will happen, because the complete opposite will end up happening at the end. So I really appreciated that ending. And actually, I was watching one of AP's videos from his channel, A Critical Dragon, and he talks about like these themes of quest and journey, and he talks about how Erikson conveys the theme of destination as not the most important thing in the series, but instead the journey itself, and that everything that we go through in our lives will always be part of us in some way. The journey is much more important than the destination. And I think AP talked about it as psychological realism, which I think it's vital to this story, because it's the importance of acknowledging who we are and our journey, as some of all of our problems, as some of our memories, our joys and celebrations. And even though many of the journeys in Deadhouse Gates might seem like they ended up in failure, actually it did not feel like failure at all. It was a natural conclusion that in a way created many emotional responses to the readers and added, in my opinion, many layers to many of the characters in this book. So yeah, I think even though Callum's storyline might seem like it was a complete failure, it really wasn't, and it added also much more depth to the character of Lasine in only 1.5 pages. So that was really enjoyable. I also really enjoyed Callum's interactions with Minala. I'm not personally a big fan of hers, but I think their interactions were very interesting. But Callum's best companion has to be Aptorian. I think it's the best creature from this world. I loved him so much. And that last battle with the assassins in Malaz City was just so amazing. It was outstanding choreography of, battle, and the events that occurred were so good. I was so immensely hooked in those pages. And then we also get to travel with Fiddler, Crocus and Absalar, who are also in some way in this Path of Hands storyline. And they are trying to get Absalar back home. And again, this was good. I got to see more of their characters, which was very nice. And I ended up appreciating more. But in many ways, this was, I think, the weakest storyline of the book. I was left in a lot of doubts with the ending of their storylines. But the best moment with them, I think, was at the beginning of the book with this enormous gargantuan sea monster, this Denrabi Soul Taken, who was trying to kill them. And then it's the head of the Denrabi is blown off by a cusser. So that was an epic scene. That was really enjoyable. And also, I have to say that with the Path of Hands storyline, it took me quite a while to get into it, this animalistic forced migration of the divers and the soul taken, driven by this instinct to try and ascend and take the throne. I was very confused, I have to say, at the beginning, because I had no idea what a diver or a soul taken was. I didn't want to look online because I was really afraid of reading spoilers. But I was very confused at the beginning. It got really good at the end of the book, but at the beginning I was just lost. I had no idea what was going on. And also in this storyline of The Path of Hands, we also get to travel with Ikariam and Mappo. Ikariam and Mappo is the best bromance friendship from the whole series. I haven't finished the series yet, but I can already tell you it's going to be my favorite one, because their friendship is so incredibly pure, so real. I mean, even though Ikariam is half Jagut and he's half human and he's capable of destroying the whole world, basically, and he goes through this cycle of forgetfulness and is trapped in this cycle of losing memory, which I think is something really interesting. And every time he's close to remembering, Mappo is there kind of to avoid it in some way. And I was actually watching one of the interviews with Erickson, and he said that Ikariam represented in some way cultural amnesia, which was like, oh wow, I had not thought about it when I read the book. But he's in a way carrying this burden of tragedy with him everywhere he goes, and has no memory of it. And the term cultural amnesia couldn't be more on point, I think. And also in this book, I think it really explores these themes of cycles and this cycle of life and destruction in many ways. We see so many of these cities rising into glory, but also we get to visit some cities that are completely destroyed and devastated. And again, it plays on with this cycle of memory of Ikariam. So the themes of creation and destruction are quite prevalent in this book, I feel. And also, one of the other characters that I really enjoyed was Iscarol, Pust and Mogora, which I think were so necessary in this book in so many ways. Because there was grief, there was tension, there were times where I was so confused in this book, that the breaks of humor that they both provided us were so necessary, I feel. And I'm pretty sure he's much more intelligent than he actually seems in many ways. And in this book, we also get to know more of the assassin of High House Shadow, Cotillion, who, in my opinion, he takes a much more hands-on role in, for example, guiding Absalar and her companions. And I wasn't expecting that, because I thought that these ascendants were more didn't have such hands-on role in these books, but I feel like they can appear from any time to another. And he perhaps feels a bit guilty for abducting and possessing and forcing Absalar to do incredibly horrible things in Gardens of the Moon. So it was really nice to see more of him. And to me, again, his character felt much more fleshed out here than in Gardens of the Moon. And then that final scene with all of them running for Tremorlor, where literally everything is going nuts. I had no idea what was going on. There were shapeshifters everywhere, and Ikariam's basically losing it. And then Iscarol Pust calls for help, and these Hounds of Shadow end up appearing. That was a moment, I have to say, even though I was very lost. That was a very cool moment. And one of the other storylines in Deadhouse Gates was the Apocalypse, with the Whirlwind Rebellion trying to bring down these Malazan occupiers and trying to restore things to how they used to be in the past. So basically trying to remove them from the Seven Cities continent. And one of the things I really enjoyed about it was how the signals in the walls of Seven Cities were kind of foreshadowing how the rebellion would rise in the future. So I really loved that. I thought that was really interesting to read. And the whole idea of the Whirlwind Wall, I thought that was a very interesting thing as a physical manifestation, because I live in the Canary Islands, which is really close to Morocco. and we get to see these enormous sandstorms that basically come from the Sahara Desert, and they travel over the sea. And then suddenly you could be one day in the beach, and in the horizon you can see this enormous wall of sand just getting closer and closer and closer to the Canarian coast. So it really reminded me of that in many, many ways. And one of the other things from the rebellion that I enjoyed was the moment when the old Shaikh is killed by the Red Blades. Because again, it felt so incredibly anticlimactic. I wasn't expecting her to be killed at that moment. I thought there would be this massive rebellion that would be born when she finally read the book, and everything to go incredibly crazy. But then nothing really happened. So I always enjoy, again, how Erikson flips my thoughts. And again, subversion of expectations. And one of the other characters that I really enjoyed in this book was Lostara Yil. Although I felt like we didn't get too many of her viewpoints. So I hope we're going to see more of her in future books. I'm pretty sure we are. And then that moment when the new Shaikh comes into place, I feel was very well orchestrated, because up until the last minute, I actually thought it would be Absalar, the one who would literally become the new Shaikh Reborn. And only until I was actually reading the new Felicin chapters, that was when I did finally realize that she had become Shaikh Reborn. So that was very mind-blowing in many ways. And then, so talking about Felicin, I am very aware of all the hate that she gets by the fandom, but to me, she is just incredibly fragile and broken and is emotionally destroyed. She's letting herself do anything to her, and I know she lashes out to everyone around her, treating them in quite a bad way. I'm not going to deny that, but I just feel so sorry for her in some ways. I can really sympathize with her. Like, imagine your own sister bringing you to this Otataral island to work in the mines and then probably die. I mean, I think she probably is the character that has the most depth to her. Like, she has so many layers, and I loved getting to see her viewpoint, because with her we got to visit and we got to travel, but we also saw a very internal journey of her struggles and her conflicts and everything that was going on in her head. And one of the things I think Erikson managed incredibly well was the whole topic about rape. I don't think it was used for shock purpose at all. I don't like reading rape in books normally. I think it's very necessary many of the times, especially in the fantasy genre. But I somehow found that it was important to highlight in this book. And also, like, given the fact that she is only 15 years old, I felt so bad and sorry for her. I really don't understand how she gets so much hate. But I think that people will probably change their minds with future books in the series, at least. I hope. And the whole Otataral location, I think, was really, really cool. I want to see more of Otataral. I want to know more of its magical powers and everything, so that was really nice. One of the characters I wasn't a really fan of in this book was Heboric Light Touch with his tattoos and no hands. I wasn't a fan of his characters. I just simply couldn't connect more with him. So I don't know, I really don't know what to say about him. I'm curious to see more of him in future books, but I just couldn't connect much more with him. So yeah, but one of the characters I can never forget Erikson for killing was Culp. That was just very unexpected. I did not see that coming at all. But the scene when he dies was very cool, I feel. It was one of the moments when I realized I was really invested into the story. And another other characters that I really loved was Bodin. Such a mysterious character also. I would have loved to see more of him, but I guess we're not going to be able to see him. Why couldn't Heboric have died instead of him? I can't understand that. Why couldn't Heboric have died? But one of the scenes in Deadhouse Gates that left me so confused was the boat location with where they get to travel through these warrens, and there's some characters ascending, and then random heads of Edur soldiers, and then there's this dragon that appears out of nowhere. I was so incredibly lost. I had no idea what was going on. It was probably the weakest part of the book for me, and we got to spend a couple of chapters there, so that felt a bit heavy for me. But one of the other characters I really enjoyed was the Malazan Marines, like Truth, Gessler, and Stormy. Some of my favorite characters of the series, and the moment when they unite with the Chain of Dogs and take some of the refugees with them, that was really cool. And also the fact that, one of the facts that made it so funny for me was that they stand basically on the precipice of ascendancy due to literally blind luck of passing through a Telan Warren at the right place at the right time. And we got to see how lucky they were, whereas on the other hand we see these divers and soul taken who are searching for ascendancy in the path of hands and are literally getting killed for it. And then Stormy, Truth, and Gessler just were in the right time at the right place, so I thought that was really, really funny. And then the last storyline I will talk about is the Chain of Dogs, and I have left it for the last thing to talk about on purpose because it's my favorite storyline of this book and will probably be my favorite storyline of the whole series, because I highly doubt anything can surpass the epicness of this storyline. I highly doubt it. Oh my god, every time I say the words Chain of Dogs, it pains my heart. It's so heart-wrenching, really. Even the name Chain of Dogs, it's just perfect, mirroring kind of the Wiccans, them being chained into this forced migration, this chain, literally this physical chain, this monumental migration of human lives crossing across this enormous continent where they are being attacked by people who want to see them dead, and these refugees that are literally everyone, children, men, women, elderly. So painful, really. It's the most... I mean, the quote, which I think sums up really well the Chain of Dogs, is children are dying. That's a succinct summary of humankind, I'd say. Who needs tomes and volumes of history? Children are dying. The injustices of the world hide in those 3 words. And that quote, together with the quote, the lesson of history is that no one learns, I think perfectly sum up the whole book incredibly well. I think those 2 quotes are the best quotes from the whole book, and it just really encompasses everything, the whole theme of compassion that runs through all of these books, and it encompasses it incredibly well. I must say though that one of the other things that I really enjoyed from the Chain of Dogs was the appearance of the Trigal Guild, because it was so unexpected and I really loved it. It gave me so much hope. And we were suffering through grief, and we were, all of these characters, they could not see the light at the end of the tunnel, and this finally gave them some hope. So it was a moment that I appreciated a lot from this book. And even though for the first couple of pages I was not a fan of Duiker, I wasn't really into him. I can't really tell you why. I found him a bit boring, slightly boring, but oh my god, the moment he joins the refugees, everything changed 180 degrees, and it became my favorite point of view from the whole book. He wasn't my favorite character, but I can tell you he was my favorite viewpoint from the whole series, probably. This element of a historian telling the story of these events in a very visual and cinematic and authentic way. It was so gripping to read. The last 200 pages, I just couldn't stop reading. I spent the whole day reading those last 200 pages. I was hooked. It was intense, and I feel like his viewpoints merged beautiful storytelling, incredible philosophy, and these bestial action scenes, and it merged everything really, really well, I feel. I have to say I wasn't a fan of the beginning of the book too much. I was very lost at the beginning. I enjoyed being lost, but I have to say I wasn't really, really hooked. But when the Chain of Dogs started really coming together and all of these storylines started to like accelerate, it was just impossible to stop reading, really. It was impossible. And Coltaine forever. I really love how we did not get to see a viewpoint from his character in Deadhouse Gates, because I feel like it kept him at a distance, which I think it was necessary. The way he seemed, that way he seemed more iconic and more mysterious, and in many ways it portrayed him as a hero. This leader that sacrificed himself to deliver the refugees to Aaron, and that element of mystery that surrounded his character throughout the whole book. A character that could literally do the impossible. I found that really, really compelling. And one of the other warlocks from the Wiccan clan that I also really appreciated was Sormo Enath. I found his character really, really interesting. And that moment when Sormo is killed at the Vathar crossing, and then hundreds of butterflies flock to take his soul, that moment was so beautiful, so immensely magnificent. It was fascinating. I loved it. And the battle at Vathar, I have to say, I must admit, it was very intense. I'm not the best reader when there's these battle scenes going on. I get very lost many of the times. I don't know what's going on. I'm not the best one in terms of weapons and military combats. I enjoy reading it, but I get very lost really quickly. But with this scene in particular, I felt like it was just very gripping. It got my attention 100%. It was incredibly visual and cinematic. I would love to see this one day on TV. Well, I mean, I really don't want to see this again because I think it would literally break my heart, especially seeing it on TV. But I feel like it would make a great movie or a great series. I think it would be amazing to see it one day in TV. And I feel like it can be done. I don't think it's something that is impossible to do. But for sure, my favorite beloved Wiccans have to be Nil and Nether. I just got attached to them from the very beginning. I can't say why really, but it was just very enjoyable to read even though we didn't see their viewpoints, it was very nice to see their reactions. For example, their pain when Coltaine falls. I could just feel their pain inside. I literally went inside their skin and felt their tremendous pain. It was incredibly vivid. And the fall of Coltaine is one of the most cinematic and painful sequences I have read in my reading experience. I haven't read that many books, but it was really, really painful. The only times I had cried before was when reading the Red Wedding in A Song of Ice and Fire. So that was the only time I had ever cried, and oh my god, it was so hard to read. The pain wasn't coming from the fact that Coltaine and his army were killed. It wasn't because of that, but because of the fact that so many soldiers, commanded by the despisable High Fist Ponquol, because they sat there and they did absolutely nothing to save their lives of Coltaine and his army, and that was what actually killed me inside. Again, we see this theme of compassion running through this book so intensely throughout all of the storylines in this book, and obviously the theme of compassion was incredibly prevalent in that scene in particular. And when the archer Squint has to shoot, and again he notices that he has to kill his icon Coltaine, that was again heart-wrenching and shattering. Really, it was really, really hard to read. So in general, I feel like Deadhouse Gates is such a monumental roller coaster of emotions. Like I said before, I must confess, at the beginning of the book I was completely lost. I had no idea what was going on, but at the same time I feel like many of the other readers feel the same way when they start reading, because it's a completely new cast of characters with a shift of continent and a shift of culture and many new events going on. So at the same time I feel like it's something normal that happens to many people. But to me, this book was the defining turning point in the whole series. That was the moment where I finally realized that I had to read everything. in this series. Not only the 10-book Malazan Book of the Fallen, but everything in this world. And all of the themes explored in this book and the character journeys that we go through made this, to me, one of the most special books in the series for me. Even though I'm still reading the Malazan Book of the Fallen, but to me, Deadhouse Gates will forever stay very, 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 very close to my heart forever. And yeah, that is all for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed this discussion. I know it was a bit rambly, I'm sure of it, but that's just how I intend to review all of these books, because I feel like Malazan is all to do with emotions and wild thoughts and just getting out what you have inside of you. So that's how I intend to review the series. So thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed. If you have liked the video, please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that. And if you have any comments, I'm more than happy to talk about anything to do with these books, because I adore them so much. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.